Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is on the pivotal moments following the initial Titan emergences, specifically looking at the events of the Hong Kong standstill. That's Titanverse Episode 2. I think this incident really shattered the simple assumption that all Titans are just indiscriminate destroyers.
Right.
So, the central question that came out of the GDF post-analysis is this. Was Quake-Wing's sudden intervention, which, let's face it, did ultimately save the city center from Krak-Os, was that just a military coincidence? Something that requires humanity to maintain an aggressive defense posture? Or was it a demonstrable, maybe even calculated act of strategic intervention, one that demands a fundamental shift toward understanding and maybe even coexistence? I stand firmly on the side that Titans remain inherently unpredictable global threats. And Quake-Wing's protection? That was nothing more than a coincidental byproduct of it fighting a rival.
See, I come at it from a really different angle, that interpretation, and I get it from a tactical perspective, I really do. But it feels like it misses the forest for the trees. It just entirely dismisses the rapidly growing body of evidence, much of it compiled by Dr. Eris Thorne's team, actually, that points toward purpose, towards strategy among these, entities. So I'm arguing that Quake-Wing acted with decisive, almost surgical intelligence, not out of regard for humanity, I'm not saying that, but to preserve its own defined biome from what it clearly perceived as abyssal contamination. This, to me, demonstrates a complex ecological or maybe strategic logic that the GDF really needs to stop fighting and start trying to decipher.
Well, the necessity for continued military vigilance is frankly non-negotiable. And Hong Kong is just a horrific testament to that. I mean, we're dealing with Titans like Quake-Wing, which clocks in at Mach 3 speeds, a massive threat, and Krak-Os, which is this relentless swarm that just overwhelmed established human infrastructure and tragically capsized a civilian ferry, a ferry full of people just trying to get away. Major Rostalda's team, Aegis, they were forced into a tactical engagement the moment Krak-Os started latching onto those skyscrapers. That engagement was necessary, completely necessary, regardless of Quake-Wing's ultimate motive, because human life was immediately and directly endangered.
But we just cannot allow the immediate tactical response to define the long-term strategic reality, can we?
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because Quake-Wing's resulting quote-unquote protection of the cityscape was, strategically speaking, an irrelevant coincidence. Its core objective lines up perfectly with the established factional conflict we're seeing. We know the Terran Titans operate under defined energy objectives, an objective made, terrifyingly clear later when Magmox was observed actively using structures like the Giza pyramids as, specialized energy nodes or charging stations. Krak-Os, being an abyssal, represents a rival asset, or maybe a resource consumer. So Quake-Wing's goal? Purely focused on eliminating that threat to Terran resource control. We saw the raw devastation during the Tokyo emergence, didn't we? Where Alpha Titans like Magmox and Leviathan just leveled the harbor simply by colliding. The GDF must continue to treat all Titans as hostile entities, or at the very least, sources of unacceptable collateral damage.
Okay, that's a compelling argument for the immediate threat assessment. But have you considered the nature of the attack itself? Quake-Wing's action, it was demonstrably purposeful. It moved far beyond mere brute destruction. I mean, if the goal was simply eliminating a rival, why not just use brute force collision, like we saw in Tokyo? The intelligence here was surgical. It deployed a focused, high-frequency sonic shriek that specifically disrupted the Krak-Os hive mind, shattering their collective coordination. It targeted the strategic communication asset of the abyssal force, not really the physical city structure itself. That reveals a level of complexity far exceeding simple territorial squabbling, right?
Okay, complexity, maybe, but relevant complexity?
Yes. The factional context confirms this. Quake-Wing, a Terran, the Architect faction, as Thorne calls them, views Krak-Os, an abyssal harvester, as an existential ecological threat. The abyssals consume and process minerals and resources that the Terrans seem to utilize for their larger, maybe planetary engineering goals. We saw that relationship confirmed by that bizarre resource transaction observed at the Dead Sea anomaly, remember? Where Abyssals and Terrans were actually exchanging refined materials. So when Quake-Wing dove toward those infested skyscrapers, it wasn't random. It was protecting its domain from contamination by eliminating a rival force that was violating its territory and consuming its resources. And look, Rostovola's ultimate decision, providing fire support for the Terran, against all standing military instinct, that, for me, validates the presence of a decipherable, greater purpose. It basically forced the GDF into the role of a reluctant ecological referee, not just a simple combatant.
I see why you emphasize the strategic targeting aspect. I do. But we have to focus on the external, undeniable reality, the immediate human cost. You talk about targeting the hive mind, but the immediate reality for Major Rostova on the ground was human casualties. That capsized ferry and, a massive loss of infrastructure. We just cannot base global defense policy on extrapolations of alien resource objectives when human lives are at stake every single time these entities interact. The fact remains that this high-frequency sonic distortion in the sheer speed, Mach 3, make Quake-Wing an unacceptable risk, regardless of its supposed intentions.
I understand the ethical imperative driving the military mindset. I really do. And the capsized ferry is, of course, a tragedy that demands intervention. But the question is, what kind of intervention? Rostova's original instinct, remember, was to engage both threats. It was only when Quake-Wing performed its targeted strike, a strike that frankly neutralized the abyssal threat far faster than Aegis could have hoped to, that Rostova adjusted fire. This suggests the Terrans are operating under some kind of established global economy, not just blind chaos. And if we refuse to study that economy, well, we are doomed to perpetually mistake strategic resource management for random aggression.
But let's look at the sheer secondary effect of their, quote, purposeful actions. You want to rely on their good graces, but what happens when their resource management requires, destabilization? We later saw Quake-Wing deploy its sonic capabilities not just against other Titans, but against human infrastructure on a massive scale. It threatened the Hoover Dam by tuning the Grand Canyon, for crying out loud. GDF personnel were forced into a desperate effort just to stabilize the ground because the Titan was literally using the continent as a drum for its geological purposes. That is not coexistence. That's planetary weaponization. Its surgical intelligence simply means it's a more precise threat.
And that's precisely why we must shift our perspective. The Titans are acting on a planetary scale. Trenchbreaker attacking the Statue of Liberty wasn't just vandalism. It was likely a strike against, permanence, against a symbol. Quake-Wing using the Grand Canyon as an energy conductor. That's a geological act, maybe a form of planetary engineering we don't understand yet. The GDF's role, I think, has to transition from simple combatant to maybe environmental translator. We are trying to impose human rules of engagement on what seem to be warring alien civilizations with goals measured in millennia.
And that, I argue, leads directly to tactical paralysis. Acknowledging Titan purpose, as you call it, leads to indecision. We saw it with Dr. Tanaka during the Tokyo emergence, didn't we? He was just paralyzed by the horror of realizing humanity was just collateral damage in a conflict we didn't even understand. If the enemy is fighting for planetary control, even if it's based on optimizing resource allocation or planetary systems, the GDF must maintain the military option. We need teams like Rostova's Aegis to stabilize the conflict. If we surrender the military option, we surrender the means to prevent total societal collapse every time their interests happen to collide. And if the Terrans, who, the Gorgon root star chart revealed are extraterrestrial architects, if they truly see humanity as, an infestation to be cleared, which seems like a logical conclusion of their long-term geological actions, how can coexistence ever be feasible long-term?
But the historical record, brief as it is, shows that the GDF's most successful strategies have come from violating standard military doctrine and actually following Eris Thorne's insights. Insights based on understanding Titan priorities. Think back to the New York Harbor conflict. Trenchbreaker was tricked, redirected not by superior firepower, but by a phantom Terran signal. That was deception based on understanding Titan protocol, not sheer strength. We are just not strong enough to win this war of attrition. And yes, the Gorgon root chart proved the Terrans are extraterrestrial, shattering that previous GDF narrative that these were simply nature's monsters run amok. We have to abandon the simplistic seek and destroy model and embrace the the much harder reality that they are warring civilizations with complex geopolitical or, well, geo-ecological goals.
And what happens then when nature, as you put it, starts making tactical decisions that just happen to benefit humanity, like you claim Quake-Wing did in Hong Kong? We just rely on it continuing to benefit us? That is a strategic gamble we absolutely cannot afford to take. The only thing we can control is our response to the immediate tangible threat.
We are not relying on their good graces. We're relying on the potential consistency of their purpose, assuming they have one. They seem to be acting as they must to achieve their objectives, whatever those might be. Our job, perhaps, is just to survive in the gaps left by their conflict. I mean, look at Gorgon Root, another Terran, actively rebuilding the Great Barrier Reef after Leviathan's consumption. That wasn't an act of charity towards humanity. It looked like purposeful maintenance of the planetary ecosystem, maybe necessary for their own long-term resource goals. Our survival depends on us becoming observers and translators first, and combatants only as a very last resort.
Then we fundamentally disagree on the core definition of survival on this new global stage. For me, survival means establishing human dominance, or, at the very least, effective isolation from the Titan conflict, maintaining absolute autonomy. Relying on Quake-Wing's supposed ecological purpose is suicide because their conflict involves collateral damage on the scale of leveling the harbor or triggering continental earthquakes. Humanity's long-term survival requires maintaining the GDF as an independent, decisive military force, capable of preventing planetary collapse caused by their battles.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the GDF can ever establish dominance against forces that operate on a geological timescale. It just seems futile. Survival means adapting to the new reality, however harsh. The Titans, whether they're consuming, terraforming, or rebuilding, are effectively the planet's new masters, or at least the dominant players. The GDF's future mission, I believe, isn't fighting them outright, we can't win that, but intelligent intervention. Translation may be targeted sabotage of abyssal assets if we understand enough, and localized diplomacy, if you can call it that. Becoming arbiters, perhaps, protecting small human pockets within this new planetary economy. We have to learn their rules if we are to negotiate for our space within them.
The terrifying scale, the unpredictable secondary effects, and the catastrophic collateral damage caused by Titans. Look, regardless of their complex internal motives or surgical intelligence, it all demands that the GDF maintains an aggressive defensive posture. Coincidence or temporary mutual benefit is simply not a durable basis for global defense. We must protect human lives with human force.
And yet, the growing evidence of Titan intelligence, selective targeting, and clear economic or ecological behavior, from the Dead Sea anomaly to the implications of the Gorgon star chart, it all proves their actions are rooted in deep purpose, I believe. Survival depends on humanity shifting from brute warfare to a deep, perhaps even respectful, understanding of the Titan's ecological and strategic roles. If we fail to understand their rules, well, we will simply be consumed by their conflict. And Hong Kong was our first real, stark warning.
The Hong Kong standstill remains that critical turning point, doesn't it? A moment where military necessity and, biological reality violently collided.
Exactly. And it leaves us with this profound ambiguity about humanity's true, sustainable role in this new planetary order. Maybe the Titans aren't nature's monsters. Maybe they're its immune system.